Well, the September monthly reward card has finally been revealed, and I guess let me stop there. It was theoretically spoiled yesterday, but I wanted to wait until it was officially confirmed before I did my video on it. So some of you have likely already seen this card, have already seen some other content creators do their analysis on it, and so on and so forth. So I guess for that I apologize, but I just wanted to wait until it was officially revealed. So the card is here. It is a Spellsword class card. Spellsword is finally getting some love. It is a 4-cost creature. It is a 4/5 body. It has Guard, and it has Slay of gain 3 health. Emperor's Blade is really good, but it might be it might be the best card to not make an impact in a long time. And I'm going to try to explain that sentence in a couple of phases. So first we're going to look at the card in a vacuum, and then I'm going to talk about why I think that it might not make an impact, and if it does, where I think that it will. So first, the card in a vacuum. Very, very good. A 4-cost 4/5 is great as far as stats are concerned, right? It is a Stone Tooth Scrapper, but with extra goodies tied to it. It passes the Lightning Bolt test, right? It does not die to Lightning Bolt. A 4-drop that does not die to Lightning Bolt is usually pretty good on its own. The fact that it has a 4 attack is also not irrelevant. There are a lot of 4-drops, specifically when you're thinking about things like Mystic Dragon running around and other cards in that range, right? That this will trade with. This will trade with even some 5-drops, right? Theoretically, in a vacuum, this would trade with and survive a Cliff Racer. So, stat-wise, great. The fact that it has a keyword, even better. The fact that it has a Slay ability, even better. It is really, really good in a vacuum. Now, the problem is that this card does not exist in a vacuum. So right out of the gate, because it costs 4, because it has Guard, because it gains health, people are going to look at this and immediately start making comparisons to other control style cards. And in Spellsword, that class particularly, the 4-cost drop slot, right, where you would be playing things at a 4-cost, is already pretty crowded. Hive Defender is the natural comparison. Hive Defender is a 3/6 guard, does not have any other abilities, that costs 4. This is a 4/5 guard, but this also then has Slay, right? So it's interesting because this card is better and worse in some instances, right? So earlier I mentioned Cliff Racer. Cliff Racer is one of those cards that you sometimes use to help like kill a Hive Defender. So a lot of times if you're playing some sort of either mid-range or aggressive deck that runs Cliff Racer, you might already have something on the board, you trade your little thing into it to wound the Hive Defender, and then Cliff Racer runs into it. Cliff Racer survives because Hive Defender only has 3 attack power, so in many ways, like, you kind of get like not really a value trade, but at least you protect your investment, right? Like you're playing something and it doesn't immediately die. Now that doesn't work in this scenario. In this scenario with the Emperor's Blade, Cliff Racer still dies to Emperor's Blade, and it doesn't do enough on its own, so you still require at least one other card to, you know, mow through it. Now, on the other hand, Curse is a problem, right? So like Curse and Cliff Racer still allows you to trade with this card. In that case, Cliff Racer still survives. But the point is that the 4 attack matters. It means you trade with the Cliff Racers, you trade with the Mystic Dragons, you destroy the young mammoths of the world. 4 attack is entirely relevant. The fact that it has 5 health, also relevant, but there's not as many creatures that hit for 5 that don't hit for 6 anymore. I think this card might have been in a worse place back when Thief of Dreams was a 5/5. The fact that that's now been nerfed to a 4/4 means that this isn't really threatened by that. This does die to like Black Dragon, though that doesn't see a lot of play often enough. Yeah, it's hard for me to think about like 5/5 cards that aren't much later in the game. So, Bone Daddy, Unkano, things like that. Now, besides just Hive Defender, Spell Sword also has like Edict of Azura in the 4 slot, potentially Cloudrest Illusionist. That's a really popular one, both because of the prophecy and because you can combine it with Execute to make your tiny removal like big hard removal. Essentially, Spell Sword is pretty crowded at 4, so determining where this fits, do you run this instead of Hive Defender? Do you run this instead of Cloudrest Illusionist? Do you not run Edict? Who knows, right? But the point is that shoehorning this into a control build isn't as easy as it looks, even though this card is really, really good. I want to reiterate that. I personally feel like in a vacuum, this card is great. It's just that I don't know where it fits in a control build. Now, where I do think it could shine, so if this does see play, actually let me defend that statement. I'm saying if this does see play, because the other problem with it going into a control deck is that as good as this is, it doesn't do anything new. Spellsword Control struggles with card draw. Spellsword Control struggles with early aggression, especially ones that go wide like a token deck, because it doesn't have AoE, it doesn't have Ice Storm, things like that. And this card doesn't really help with either. Health gain isn't really a huge deal for Spellsword. They've already got access to it. They've got things like Knight of the Hour. Playing a guard isn't a big deal. You got everything from Dark Guardian to Knight of the Hour to Hive Defender. It doesn't bring anything new to the table for a Spellsword Control deck. So again, I think the card is very good, but I don't know if it's going to do enough to Spellsword Control to make it more viable than it already is. So do I expect to see an increase in popularity after the month rolls over? Yeah, absolutely. That's pretty common. People want to try out the new card. But like a week from then, I don't think that this card brings anything new enough to Spellsword Control to have us see it any more often than we already do. Now, back to what I was saying. If this card does see play, where I would see this potentially shifting popularity, or where I would expect this to be a better fit, would be in a mid-range Spellsword. Mid-range Spellsword used to be a thing. It kind of fell out of favor. But if you played a mid-range Spellsword that was focused on big bodies, maybe even focused on guards, like you could almost play guard deck, but as like a mid-range style deck, this would certainly fit there, right? So you could play your Dark Guardians, you could play your Hive Defenders, you could play this, with the idea of you're just playing a big statted creature on the board every turn. And hopefully, because of the sheer stats alone, at some point you're going to get a value trade or two, and just grind out your opponent. Spellsword also kind of uniquely, like as a mid-range class, has access to a lot of healing. So while you wouldn't be necessarily a control deck, if you're playing it as like a mid-range deck that's just fighting for control of the board and you need some healing to help you bridge the gap against very aggressive decks, this would help with it. And then Spellsword already has access to things like Dawnstar Healer, Bruma Profiteer, and some others, so that you could get that like steady trickle of health that just helps you stabilize even further. This is the sort of thing that would go very well in a deck that is trying to run like Bone Daddy as your tap end, and then a lot of really good mid-range threats. I could even see this fitting into like an East Empire theme deck. If you have East Empire and then you have like your Dark Guardians, your Hive Defenders, this, Bone Daddy, Wrath of Sithis, all these things that would trigger the benefits of that card, that might be interesting. Is it good enough? I don't know. But I certainly feel like that deck benefits more from the addition of this card, where you wouldn't likely be running 3 copies of Edict of Azura. You might still, but I think that play style where you're just going for raw power on the board is going to benefit more from this than necessarily like Spellsword Control or Spellsword Ramp, because I just think that there's more room in a mid-range deck to force in you know, the 4 slot, right? It's okay if it's heavy there, but in a control deck, you know, you got to have your top end, you got to have your things that close out the game, you know, your Manticores, your Mirax. If you're running the ramp version, you have to have the ramp package, so you got to have your Tree Minders and your Hiss Groves, and after you shoehorn all that stuff in, and then all of the other stuff that makes it so you don't die, this card is really fighting for a spot in a control deck. Again, I'm not saying that you wouldn't run it there, I'm just saying that I don't think that it drastically changes a lot, but I do think that it could very, very well fit in the right mid-range deck. That's probably where I'll try it out when the month rolls over. And I think that the card standalone is very, very good. I just wonder about the rest of Spellsword, right? Does Spellsword as a class have enough to support this? I don't know. It's not like Sower. Like, Orcs were already seeing some play before, and then when Sower of Revenge came out, it really pushed Orcs kind of over the edge, or over the top, if you will, just because Sower was a fantastic card for its cost, for its stats, in a class that was like just on the cusp. I don't know if Spellsword could be defined as just on the cusp before this card, and I don't know that this is, you know, on par with Sower in terms of like tipping it and giving it something that it needed just a little bit extra. Very, very good. I just don't know how much of an impact it will make. Again, I expect to see it a lot at the beginning of the month. That's normal. But a week or two in, that'll, I think, be the real tail of the tape. So yeah, that's my take anyway. I'd like to know what you think. Do you plan on using the card? If so, are you going to use it mid-range? Are you going to use it control? Let me know. But, you know, as always, thanks for watching, and until next time, may you walk on warm sands.